Sandustry is the kind of game that seems simple in the first few minutes, digging sand, separating gold, building a conveyor belt or two, but quickly turns into an automation puzzle where every pixel of the world is a precious resource waiting to be exploited. If you want to stop wasting time digging sand with a pickaxe and start building a real factory, these 10 tips will help you drastically accelerate resource collection and make that leap in efficiency that separates a beginner from an industry master in Sandustry. I'm Mary, and let's get into it. This is undoubtedly one of the first decisions that makes the biggest difference in Sandustry: where to build your initial factory. Here's a quick tip. If you're thinking about buying Sandustry, check out Instant Gaming because it's at a great price over there right now. So it's definitely worth checking before buying from traditional storefronts. And just a quick reminder, Instant Gaming isn't a marketplace. You're buying directly from the store. Also, if you decide to pick it up, using my affiliate link in the description helps out a ton, and I'd really appreciate it. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and it supports the channel massively. Now, let's get back to the tips. I always recommend looking for a spot near a lake or any large body of water, but that also has plenty of sand and dirt around it. It might seem like a small detail at first, but the distance between your resources defines how much your production will flow or how much time you will waste carrying material back and forth. Water is fundamental because it allows you to turn regular sand into wet sand. The wet sand needed to start an important part of processing. Without a nearby water source, you end up having to build huge pipelines, transport liquid over long distances, or abandon your first facility too early to find a better area. All of this consumes resources, space, and, most importantly, time. When you position the factory between a good reserve of sand or dirt and a lake, the cycle becomes much faster. You mine the material, take it to the water to moisten it, and send the wet sand directly to the shaker. It is a simple loop, but extremely efficient for the early stages, especially when your automation is still limited and every conveyor belt makes a difference. So before you start placing machines in the first empty space that pops up, I would take a few minutes to explore the map and find that ideal spot. A good starting location reduces bottlenecks, keeps the factory more organized, and increases your resource intake from early on. In Sandustry, building near the right materials isn't just convenience, it's a huge advantage to grow faster. When you start accumulating your first fluxite crystals in Sandustry, the temptation to spend everything on raw speed or carrying capacity is huge. However, my main recommendation for anyone who really wants to speed up progression is to unlock the material scanner on your grabber as soon as possible. This initial investment completely changes how you understand and explore the environment around you. Since every pixel in the world has its own physics and chemistry, trying to discover all interactions through trial and error consumes precious time and many resources. With the scanner upgraded, simply inspect any element to understand exactly how it reacts to heat, water, explosions, or your machines. This clarity eliminates wasted raw materials and prevents you from building entire assembly lines based on incorrect assumptions. Besides preventing costly mistakes, this tool brutally accelerates the discovery of complex reactions and valuable recipes. Instead of guessing how to process an unknown ore or how to dissolve dense rock, you immediately visualize the optimal extraction route. This allows you to design efficient factories right from the start, connecting miners, conveyor belts, and processors without creating unnecessary bottlenecks. For me, the material scanner is not just a convenience tool, but the single biggest speed multiplier you can buy early in the journey. Immediate knowledge about the properties of each pixel translates into compact automations, waste-free production cycles, and a constant flow of resources into your inventory. If you want to dominate the planet's industry quickly, spend your first fluxite on this upgrade without hesitation. After securing the material scanner, the next priority on my list of fluxite upgrades is undoubtedly the grabber. Investing early on to increase the reach and capacity of this tool seems like a small detail, but in practice, it is what sustains all your manual work before you have decent automation running. Early in the game, you will spend a lot of time moving blocks of dirt, sand, and other materials by hand, whether to clear a path or to feed your first machines. A grabber with low reach forces you to stay extremely close to each block, which stalls your exploration and mining pace. A longer reach allows you to grab resources from further away or more dangerous spots without exposing yourself as much, saving movement and time. Capacity also makes a huge difference at this early stage. Instead of carrying small blocks one by one, an upgraded grabber allows you to move larger volumes at once, which speeds up tasks like digging tunnels, redirecting water, or stacking material for processing. This is especially valuable because before having fully connected conveyor belts and machines, practically all logistics still depend on you. That's why I always recommend spending your first Fluxite points on these grabber reach and capacity upgrades without overthinking it. They make manual work much more efficient, smooth the transition to full automation, and avoid that frustrating feeling of wasting time just hauling blocks from one place to another. It is a solid foundation that pays back the investment quickly as your factory grows. This is one of the solutions I like to use most when I want to speed up production without spending too many resources on a huge network of conveyor belts. Instead of trying to carry wet sand across the whole map, I set up a simple vertical line. I place a launcher at the bottom or near the lower part of a lake and let it shoot the wet sand directly to one or more shakers positioned above. The big secret to this setup is taking advantage of height and gravity in your favor. Water is already near the sand to be moistened, so the launcher solves the most annoying part of the logistics, transporting the wet sand up to the filtering machine. This way, material leaves the collection area and reaches the shaker directly without requiring a long sequence of conveyor belts taking up space and consuming components early in the match. For me, this method works extremely well in the early to mid-game because it is easy to expand. When a single shaker can no longer keep up with demand, I can add another beside it, adjust the firing direction, or increase wet sand production without having to dismantle the entire factory. Besides being compact, this system keeps the visual flow clear. Water below, processing above, and resources heading to the rest of the base. It's worth just testing the positioning before leaving everything running on auto. I usually watch where the wet sand is landing, adjust the distance, and ensure it enters the shaker correctly without scattering or accumulating off the line. Once you dial in that trajectory, you get continuous and much faster production using few pieces of equipment, turning Sandustry's terrain itself into part of your automation. If you want to speed up resource production, this tip here is mandatory. Never throw away waste, the famous slag. I see a lot of people stacking it in the corner of their base thinking it's trash, but in reality, this material is full of valuable components trapped inside it. The secret is to convert this slag into useful resources instead of letting it take up space and clutter your factory. The most efficient method I use is burning the slag with flamethrowers, thermal belts, pyro dispensers, or even tossing it into lava. When you burn it, it turns into burnt residue and releases components that were previously locked inside. It's the difference between having a useless pile of gray blocks and having a constant source of extra materials without needing to mine anything extra. I learned this through trial and error, after filling the map with piles of slag and realizing my production wasn't moving forward. The moment I set up a simple burning system, the game changed. Instead of chasing rare ores, I started repurposing what was previously considered production garbage. So, if you want resources much faster, do not discard slag. Build a burning process early on and make this material work for you. In Sandustry, even what seems useless becomes a resource once you understand the right reactions. When you start burning materials to generate power, you end up accumulating a lot of burnt residue, that leftover burned waste remaining after the process. The common mistake is leaving this material sitting around or using it carelessly, but the secret is to route all of it into a kinetic slag press, also called Kinetic Press, depending on the version you are playing. The mechanic is simple and powerful. By feeding burnt residue traveling from at least 25 blocks away into the Kinetic Press, you guarantee 1 gold plus 1 seed, or spore, depending on the naming, per cycle. In practice, this practically doubles your gold output without needing to build a giant mine just for that, while also giving you essential spores for higher-tier research that would stall your progression if you relied solely on exploration. In my view, this is exactly the kind of tip that separates players stuck in the early game from those who scale fast in Sandustry. Instead of treating waste like trash, you turn it into gold and research consistently. If you build your burning line with this in mind, you'll notice resources overflowing where they were once missing, freeing up time to focus on automating more complex chains instead of chasing ore all the time. The idea is to build an enclosed area, like a box or chamber, with a funnel directing water down into your tanks. Inside this space, you use the Cryoblast to generate snow or ice practically endlessly, and then burn that snow with the flamethrower. The result is rising steam, which, upon hitting the ceiling of the enclosed space, condenses into rain, falling back down to be collected by your tanks. What makes this technique so good is that it turns two actions you already do in the game, generating snow and burning material, into a renewable water source. Instead of hunting down wet biomes, digging wells, or relying on natural rainfall, you create your own cycle. Infinite snow from the Cryoblast turns into steam, steam turns into rain, and rain returns as ready-to-use water for your production chains. In practice, this takes massive pressure off your planning. You stop treating water as a finite resource and start thinking about how to scale the rest of the factory, knowing this basic input will never run dry. It's the kind of trick that feels almost like an exploit, but is completely valid within the game's logic, saving you tons of time and resources that used to go strictly into keeping your crafting lines hydrated. You build an efficient factory layout, press C, drag the cursor over the whole circuit you want to copy, and press Ctrl+C to save that section as a blueprint. After that, just place identical copies across the map instead of rebuilding everything from scratch, block by block, pipe by pipe. This completely transforms your expansion speed. Instead of wasting minutes or hours recreating the same production line every time you need more capacity, you replicate a setup you already know works in seconds. The time saved isn't just fewer clicks, it's time you can spend exploring, testing new chains, or optimizing what actually matters. In my view, mastering this is almost mandatory if you want to scale fast in Sandustry. Copying and pasting layouts saves an absurd amount of time and turns your factory into a set of standardized modular parts. The sooner you create your first reliable blueprints, the faster you will multiply resource production without getting bogged down redoing the exact same thing over and over. In Sandustry, the temptation is to hoard gold like treasure, but the best way to get resources much faster is to do the exact opposite. Treat every bar as an immediate investment, not a reserve. Early in the game, the biggest bottleneck isn't a lack of ore, it's weak tech. Slow tools, poor filters, and limited logistics make you waste time and resources on everything. Because of this, instead of filling up vaults, the ideal move is routing every incoming gold bar directly into the tech tree, prioritizing upgrades that boost speed, efficiency, and processing capacity. When you spend quickly on logistics research, better filters, launchers, and kinetic press upgrades, the impact is immediate. You extract more in the same time frame, process with less waste, and transport with fewer bottlenecks. This generates more resources, which turn into more gold, which turns into more research, a cycle that accelerates your factory exponentially rather than linearly. In practice, those who hoard gold early on feel safe, but continue producing very little. Those who treat gold as research fuel and spend it ruthlessly on the right technologies build a snowball of efficiency. Suddenly, what used to take minutes takes seconds, and the truly wealthy player in Sandustry stops being the one with stockpiled bars and becomes the one with the most advanced tech tree. When I started playing Sandustry, I used to carry everything by hand, thinking I was being productive. Over time, though, I realized this made me lose far more time than I imagined, and that the game truly demands you automate transport early. What helped me most was focusing on unlocking conveyor belts and launchers as soon as possible. Belts handle horizontal movement, carrying resources from side to side, without requiring me to run back and forth. Meanwhile, launchers handle vertical movement, throwing material up between factory layers. Another point I made sure to learn was using filters to separate what really matters: gold, burnt residue, and other useful materials, keeping waste off the primary lines. This saved me from manually sorting everything later and kept the production flow much smoother. Looking back, automating transport early was one of the single biggest drivers of my progress. Instead of losing time hauling resources by hand, I was able to focus on expanding my chains and testing new setups. In Sandustry, automation isn't an endgame luxury. It's something that greatly speeds up resource gathering right from the start.